This is a developing situation out of Washington, and it is rapidly becoming one of the most serious political crises in recent American history. What is unfolding right now is not routine political disagreement, and it is not ordinary partisan conflict. It involves questions about national security, presidential authority, and the constitutional limits placed on the commander-in-chief. According to multiple congressional sources, an unusual sequence of events began when a classified memorandum was reviewed by lawmakers in a secure facility. The document, which remains officially classified, reportedly contained information that immediately raised alarm across party lines. Within hours of reviewing its contents, senior members of Congress requested emergency discussions, signaling that the concerns went far beyond normal oversight disputes. What followed was highly unusual. Lawmakers from both major political parties, including several who have previously defended the administration, expressed concern that the actions described in the memo may have crossed a line that could not be ignored. These were not lawmakers known for seeking confrontation. Many of them had supported the president during earlier controversies. Their reaction suggests the seriousness of what they believe they reviewed. According to individuals familiar with the matter, the memo describes a period during which military authorizations were delayed under circumstances that were not linked to battlefield conditions, intelligence reassessments, or operational necessity. Instead, the document allegedly suggests that the timing of certain approvals was influenced by considerations unrelated to national defense. If accurate, this would represent a significant departure from long-standing norms governing civil-military relations in the United States. The role of the president as commander-in-chief grants wide discretion over military matters, but that discretion is not unlimited. Constitutional scholars emphasize that this authority exists to protect national security, not to serve political objectives. When lawmakers reviewed the memo, several reportedly concluded that the actions described raised serious questions about whether that principle had been violated. In response to what they saw, members of Congress convened an emergency closed-door meeting. Sources say the discussion was intense and at times emotional. Lawmakers reportedly debated not only the political consequences of speaking out, but also their personal responsibility to uphold constitutional obligations. By the end of the meeting, a bipartisan group agreed that remaining silent was not an option. A formal letter was drafted and later released publicly. The document calls for the president to resign, citing what lawmakers described as conduct incompatible with the responsibilities of the office. The language, according to those who reviewed it, is unusually direct and focuses heavily on national security risks, military readiness, and the trust placed in civilian leadership by service members. Calls for presidential resignation are extraordinarily rare, especially when they include members of the president's own party. Historically, such moments occur only when confidence in leadership has been severely damaged. Observers note that the bipartisan nature of this demand sets it apart from most modern political controversies. The situation became even more striking when a senior lawmaker from the president's party publicly acknowledged the seriousness of the issue. According to reporters present at the time, the statement reflected visible discomfort and emphasized a sense of duty rather than political calculation. For many in Washington, that moment marked a clear escalation. Historians have drawn comparisons to past constitutional crises, including the final days of the Nixon administration. In those cases, it was not public outrage alone that led to resignation, but the withdrawal of support from within the president's own party. Analysts caution that while history never repeats itself exactly, the patterns unfolding now are impossible to ignore. Legal experts stress that allegations alone do not establish guilt. However, they also note that if the actions described in the memo are substantiated, they could raise serious constitutional and legal concerns. The use of governmental authority for personal or political advantage, particularly in matters involving national defense, has long been considered a red line. Former prosecutors have pointed out that federal law strictly limits the use of government resources for political purposes. If military operations or authorizations were influenced by political considerations, That could potentially expose those involved to further scrutiny beyond congressional oversight. Within the military community, the situation is being watched closely. Trust between civilian leadership and military professionals is essential to effective defense operations. Any perception that military decisions could be influenced by political pressure risks undermining morale and long-term stability within the armed forces. Veterans groups and military families have begun expressing concern, calling for transparency and accountability. For many, the issue is not partisan. It is about ensuring that decisions affecting service members' safety are made solely in the national interest. The President has denied the allegations, dismissing the resignation demand as politically motivated and describing the controversy as the result of a coordinated attack. The administration has focused much of its response on criticizing the leak of classified information rather than addressing the substance of the claims. Supporters argue that the leak itself is the real scandal, while critics say the focus should remain on what the memo allegedly reveals. As the situation develops, more lawmakers are reportedly requesting access to the classified document. Additional statements are expected, and oversight committees may consider further action, including hearings or formal investigations. While the resignation demand carries no legal force, its political significance is substantial. This moment is testing not just individual leaders, but the institutions designed to safeguard democracy and national security. The Constitution relies on checks and balances, particularly in moments when executive power is questioned. How those checks function now will shape public trust for years to come. What happens next remains uncertain. But what is clear is that this is not a story that will fade quickly. The questions raised go to the heart of presidential authority and the responsibilities that come with it. As lawmakers, legal experts, military leaders, and the public await further developments, the nation finds itself confronting a defining moment. This is not merely a political dispute. It is a test of accountability, constitutional limits, and the principle that national defense must always come before personal or political interest. The outcome of this crisis will likely be remembered long after the immediate headlines fade. As the pressure continues to build, political leaders across Washington are being forced to confront uncomfortable questions. Questions not just about this president, but about the boundaries of power itself. Lawmakers are now weighing whether accountability mechanisms still function when political loyalty collides with national security concerns. Behind the scenes, congressional leadership is reportedly engaged in intense discussions about next steps. Some members argue that a full investigation is necessary before any further action is taken. Others believe the information already reviewed is sufficient to warrant immediate consequences. This division reflects the gravity of the moment and the uncertainty surrounding how best to proceed. Several lawmakers have stated privately that the most troubling aspect of the situation is not simply the alleged conduct, but what it represents. If military decisions can be delayed or influenced for non-operational reasons, it challenges the foundational assumption that national defense remains insulated from political maneuvering. That assumption has guided civilian-military relations for decades. Constitutional scholars emphasize that the framers of the Constitution were deeply concerned about the concentration of power in a single individual. That is why the system relies on oversight, transparency, and accountability, especially when the president exercises authority as commander-in-chief. Moments like this are when those safeguards are meant to be tested. Public reaction has been sharply divided. Supporters of the president view the resignation demand as an attack driven by political enemies and unelected bureaucrats. They argue that the leak of classified information undermines national security and should be the primary focus. Critics counter that the contents of the memo, not the leak itself, are what matter most, particularly if service members' safety was put at risk. Media coverage has intensified, with analysts debating whether this marks the beginning of a broader unraveling or a contained political confrontation. Some suggest that additional revelations could emerge as more lawmakers gain access to classified materials. Others caution that without concrete proof made public, the situation could stall in a prolonged standoff. International observers are also paying close attention. Allies rely on the stability and predictability of U.S. military decision-making. Any perception of internal instability or politicization of defense operations could have ripple effects beyond Washington, affecting diplomatic relationships and strategic partnerships. Within Congress, newer members are reportedly seeking guidance from senior colleagues, trying to understand the long-term implications of taking a public stance. For many, this is a defining moment early in their political careers. The choice to speak out or remain silent could shape their reputations for years to come. At the same time, military leadership remains publicly restrained, adhering to long-standing norms that keep the armed forces out of political disputes. Privately, however, sources suggest there is deep concern about the precedent this situation could set if left unresolved. As days pass, the question is no longer just whether the president will respond differently, but whether additional evidence will surface. Investigators are under pressure to move carefully, balancing national security concerns with the public's demand for transparency. This situation underscores a fundamental reality of democratic governance. Power depends not only on authority, but on trust. Once that trust is questioned, restoring it becomes far more difficult than maintaining it in the first place. No matter how this crisis ultimately resolves, it has already exposed deep fractures within the political system. It has forced lawmakers to confront the limits of loyalty, the weight of constitutional duty, and the cost of silence in moments of consequence. For now, the nation waits, waiting to see whether accountability will follow allegations, waiting to see whether institutions will hold firm under pressure, and waiting to see whether this moment becomes a turning point or a missed opportunity to reaffirm the principles that govern the highest office in the land. This story is still unfolding, and its final chapter has yet to be written. What is clear is that the decisions made in the coming days will echo far beyond Washington, shaping public confidence in leadership, law, and the very idea of responsible power. This moment is testing not just individual leaders, but the institutions designed to safeguard democracy and national security. The Constitution relies on checks and balances, particularly in moments when executive power is questioned. How those checks function now will shape public trust for years to come. What happens next remains uncertain. But what is clear is that this is not a story that will fade quickly. The questions raised go to the heart of presidential authority and the responsibilities that come with it. As lawmakers, legal experts, military leaders, and the public await further developments, the nation finds itself confronting a defining moment. This is not merely a political dispute. It is a test of accountability, constitutional limits, and the principle that national defense must always come before personal or political interest. The outcome of this crisis will likely be remembered long after the immediate headlines fade.